Hey, Fahad, welcome. So let's see here. Hey, oh, no worries. Yeah, Gerardo was asking a little bit about the extra credit assignment, but I'm gonna go over a few things and then I'll go into the extra credit assignment. Um, let's see here. So I guess I need to share my screen. um, let's go ahead and share my screen. All right. And then let's go ahead so I can see. Okay. So the first thing is I did move the VLAN lab out till Sunday. It was due today, but there's a few people that have been having issues with that. This one does require, if you want to get all of it, to use the command line interface, but we really haven't covered the command line interface, which is by design. So there's only like two aspects, three if you really want to get really good with your solutions, to where you use the command line interface. But it is by design. You should be able to figure it out. But if you have issues with the command line interface, if you've researched it, you still can't get it, just let me know and we can jump on Google Hangouts and that. But I do want to, whoops, I do want to just kind of highlight a little bit here. So the command line interface is really what you have in the real world, right? So the package tracer kind of lulls us into an easy belief. Let me just go ahead and throw out a router here. So we have this nice GUI back here. I gotta let it boot up, which kind of emulates or simulate, I guess emulates a router, right? So we could put cards in and things like that to act like the physical router, which that's great. But this config tab, you won't find in the real world, okay? So it makes it easy for you to kind of learn though, because if you go in and you say click onto the Ethernet 00 interface, you'll see down below here it tells you the commands that you would have had to run if this was real world. So you'd have to go into enable mode, which is first. So you come to the router prompt and you'd have to go into enable mode. Then when you're in enable mode, you got the hash, the pound sign instead of the greater than, right? So now you're in enabled mode. Then you would have to go to config terminal. Almost everything you do, you have to be in config terminal mode. And then you'll see that the command prompt changes to config, right? Then if you were wanting to do interface 00, we type in interface gigabit Ethernet 00, and then the command prompt now says we're in config-if or interface mode. And so then we can do things like enter in the IP address. So let's give this an IP address of 1.1, right? And then now we see down below here it said IP space address, IP address, and the subnet mask, and you would hit enter. So it's giving you all the command line entries on how to do it on your own. So let me go ahead and delete this, and then go here, and then let's go to the CLI. So we're here, and I'm going to exit out and exit out. And so I'm still in enable mode. I'm going to exit out one more. All right. So this is how you would come into the router. You would connect with your cable, and you would see this. This is how you would connect to the router. And I'm going to do a show R. Okay, hold on. I guess I need to be in enable mode. Show R. Yeah, I got to be in enable mode, so I'm sorry about that. I'm going to exit out. So one of the things with the command line for Cisco is if you type letters of a command, so normally it's enable, right? But I only have to type EN because there's no other command at this point that starts with EN. And so if I just, Cisco just says, you just have to type enough letters so that the command is unique. So I know what command to run. So instead of typing enable, I can just do EN and I go into enable mode. Same with the show running config, right? I can do show R and it will show me the running config. And I just have to hit the space bar to go through the configuration, right? So right now you'll see that there's no IP address on gigabit or gigabit Ethernet 0, right? So there's no IP address because I removed it. I removed that from here, but now I went. So because I went to the config mode, I went into the interface configuration. So I'm going to exit out. All right. So normally you're here in enable mode. You go into config, terminal mode. Now I want to do the interface gigabit Ethernet 00. And I want to do an IP address like I just saw the command before, right? 192.168.1.1 and the subnet mask, right? So when I entered in the IP in the GUI, this was the command that it said I needed to run to get an IP address. So if I hit enter, it worked. I didn't get any errors. And now if I go back to the config, you'll see that the IP address is set, right? So you can do it both ways here in the GUI or here at the command line. But the thing about the GUI is you can do things and it teaches you what the commands are for whatever's there in the GUI. So pay attention to these commands and try to start learning it. That's the best way. If you're going to ever do routers and switch management, you're going to want to learn the command line because this GUI doesn't exist, So the VLANs is a little harder because there's at least a couple items that don't exist in the GUI that you need to do at the command line. Like I believe it's entering the enabled password and the VLAN IP. They're minor. You can get the lab to work without doing the command line. So it isn't a major part of the grade, but I recommend that you try to figure out how to do it, those items from the command line, just to get used to doing the command line, and then try to do as much from the command line. Like the VLAN database, right? You can configure the VLAN, right? So so it typed in VLAN space database, and so now I'm in the VLAN database, and you can see that the command prompt is at VLAN, right? And so I can add my VLANs easily here, right? So I can add VLAN 11, right? And so it told me, that I just type in VLAN 11, name VLAN 11, and then it's created. So, but this is on the router and not a switch, but it works the same way on the switch. But that does bring me to another important point, though. You know, what is the purpose of a VLAN? Anybody? Who do we got on here? Okay, hi, Allison. Okay, well, so a virtual LAN, right, is to segment off traffic, right? Create different networks, right? And especially if you have a switch. I mean, I'm on a router now, but so if I go to a switch, it's the same thing, right? Yeah, okay, still booting. But it's what it's designed to do is to, like for this lab, it's ports 3, 4, and 5 are to be on VLAN 11 or VLAN 12, depending on which switch it is. So those 3, 4, and 5 are a different network than the rest of the switch ports, right? So there's 24 ports, but only these 3 are in VLAN 11 or VLAN 12, depending on which switch you're on. So they're segmented off. They don't see any of the traffic from the other ports, and the other ports don't see traffic from this port, right? From these 3 ports. They're their own network. And in order for, say, port 4 to talk to a device on port 24, you need a router. But the router, one of the caveats, in order to do that, it would have to live on both VLAN 1 and VLAN 11 or 12. Sorry. So it creates a virtual network. So this, like I said, this lab, you got to look at it from that aspect that ports 3, 4, and 5 are on their own network. So when you connect the router, you need to take that into account. So there's several ways that you can solve that. There's like 2 ways that you can solve it so that the router can talk to those ports. I'm going to leave that for you guys to figure out, but it's just giving a hint here that remember that ports 3, 4, and 5 on the switches are their own network, right? And they're meant to be segmented off from the other ports. So, okay, enough on that. But I've given extra time for that. So it is now due Sunday for the VLANs. So just because it is a little harder, does require some command line, and then the VLANs itself to actually get, because the purpose and the point of these labs is, to get the PCs to communicate, right? So you should be checking, even if the check results says that you've 100% completed the setup, you need to make sure that you can communicate your PCs. Especially in this VLAN, the idea is to get it to communicate. So you can actually get and technically configure what I can check on the packet tracer. You might have the VLAN set up, but it still may not work with the router, and you may not be able to ping PC to PC. So it's very important that you can ping PC to PC in this and most of the labs. There'll be a couple. There's at least one security lab where actually then it's not what you want, but that's a security lab. Most of these labs you should be communicating and be able to communicate PC to PC. So now let's see here. Gerardo, you were asking about the extra credit lab. Let's see here. I guess let's just go to week 13. Or so yeah, week 13. All right. Okay. Is this the lab you were talking about, Gerardo? Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. So the goal of this lab will be there's a server here. You're going to have a web page here, and you want to be able to pull up the web page on any one of these 6 PCs, right? So there's 6 PCs, one on floor 1, one on floor 2, one on floor 3. And the goal is to set up the network so that they all can reach this web page, all right? Thus all your network connections must be green. You'll also need to enable static routing on these routers in order to route traffic all the way from the PCs to the web server and from the web server back. So you'll have to learn a little bit about static routing. How to from the command line enable a route on a router. It's not difficult, but it's something that you would have to do. And then so then it just goes into showing what we have. Let's see here. Right, we've got our exterior routers here. So this is the internet. This is the data center over here, and then this is our building over here on the left. One thing is, right, so the routers 3 will connect via serial connection. So if we open up our exterior router, right now they're blank. So you're going to have to pick one of these cards here that has a serial connection, and then be able to put it also in this one here and create a serial connection so that this can work over the internet, because that's going to be setting up a connection just like it would be in the real world. Let's see here. Right. All right, so then server 0, that's your DNS server. And then here's the tricky part. So you're given one IP range, this network of 192.168.1.0, and then you're supposed to use that to configure all the IP addresses for all the devices. And so you're going to set it up using variable link subnetting, right? So, and I've given you the size of each network, right? So floor 1 will have up to 120 users, so it's your largest network. So it would get the first subnet. Then second floor has 60 users, your next largest, it gets your next subnet, right? And so you just keep subnetting that range using the variable link subnetting, and you can learn that in the book and in the packet, I think, and also online you can do some, but I know it's in the book. I think it's in the packet, and the book at least touches it a little. But basically, you'll have 7 networks here. 1, 2, 3, the 3 floors. You have the routers, the main routers for floors. They have their own network, right? Then you have the data center, right? They have their own network. You have a network between the 2 exterior routers and then these 2 routers in the data center for a total of 7 networks. And you'll have just enough to create all those subnets and for all those devices. And then I've helped out telling you which IPs to use, right? So for the first floor in that first subnet, you would use the last usable IP for the router on that floor, right? And then I tell you what to use on the external side, the one going to this router here, right? So these routers, so there's the floor goes to the PCs, it has a connection, and then one that connects to the external router, right? And I give you the IPs for the external router side to use. Then you need to turn on DHCP on routers first floor and the third floor. There's a way to turn on DHCP on these routers, and then so that the PCs get IPs from the router, and I give you the ranges, and at least to exclude the largest 64 IPs in that range, exclude the largest 24 IPs in the floor 3's range. And then let's see here. Then I give you interior routers. I give you router 3. I give you the IPs on both sides of this router. But router 4, I give you just the one that talks to router 3, or no, I'm sorry, just the one that talks to router 5. You have to figure out which one goes to on the other side that talks to router 3. Should be pretty obvious when you get the subnets. And then router 5, the interface that goes to router 4, you have to figure out. Once again, it should be very obvious from the subnet what the IP needs to be for router 5. And then the router 5 IP that goes to the servers, I give you that IP. And then, of course, you'll have to use the routers on the servers and the PCs as the gateways, right? So they're the gateways. So once you have those IPs, you can put them in as the gateways because you need a gateway to communicate. So it's not easy. There's a lot going on here, but this is an extra credit, but it is equivalent to an exam. So that's why it's not easy. There's a lot going on in this lab, but you can get partial credit. So I mean, whatever you do get done will give you points, extra credit points. So you don't have to get the whole thing right to get the 500 points. You could get incremental points. So just give it a try if you want to. I mean, but this one is extra credit. Any questions on that? That is correct. Right? No, Gerardo, you do not have to do this one. It is entirely extra credit, but that's why it's a little more difficult. It's for those that maybe didn't do so well on an exam. They can replace their exam with this. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Um, uh, all right. So and then, right, we got the exam 3 coming up. It's due a week from today at 3 o'clock. So make sure you're taking the quizzes, taking them over and over and prepping for it. I will do a review on Wednesday, but you're welcome to take the exam at any time if you feel ready. I mean, taking the quizzes is the best way. So the exam is due though by 3 o'clock next Monday. Um, and then, like I said, I moved out the VLAN lab because people are saying it's a little difficult, which it is. It was, that's why I mentioned it, weeks ago too, that it is a little more difficult because it does have some command line aspects to it. And I'll probably go over that too, maybe a little bit, if we want, maybe in week 14 or something. I want to try and go over some more command lines, because it is good that you know the command line as well. But let's see here, IP subnetting is due the 19th, so make sure you're still working on that. And then I think that's all I have that I need to pass on. Any other questions or concerns or observations? Okay. All right. Now I'm going to stop recording then. And